Do-do-do-do. 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 Hey, girlfriend, what's happening? Hey. Human beings love to pigeonhole things. Right? We love creating new names and classifying things in the very slightest of nuances. Kind of like ice, water, and steam, which of course are all water. They're just different temperature and pressure modalities of water, right? One of the fallacies of attribute reification that humans engage in, because humans are not that intellectually involved, unfortunately, is that they confuse what is conventionally true with what is ultimately true. As far as being an empirical being within the fabric of space and time, we reify things or give things importance that absolutely don't ultimately exist. And that's, of course, unfortunate. Things that, and there's a long list of them, things that ultimately don't exist that we believe are real. And of course, people used to get frightened in certain cultures. They talk about mythical beasts that don't exist. And people would be afraid of these things, and it would literally affect their health in negative ways because people would fear things that don't exist. And this, of course, is, an extreme form of attribute reification, things that are conventional only in their minds. They're created phantasms that, of course, have no ultimate real existence. The same is true, and this is where the idiots of quantum and current scientists get wrapped around their heads. And you and I both grew up with the nonsense of warped space-time. How many countless millions of times have you and I heard idiot scientists talk about curved space-time, warped space-time, time-space dilation, time-space contracture? These things don't exist ultimately. And this is the only time Nikola Tesla lost his mind. Not literally, but he ranted and raved against Einstein's basis of his relativity garbage of reification of space as having properties, which that Tesla said space, of course, has no properties. It has attributes. It's like a shadow has attributes. A shadow, you stand in a shadow, you feel cold, but a shadow is not a thing. A shadow is not a subject. It's not even a noun from hardcore philosophical denotation. A shadow is an absence of light. It has no essa, or essence. It is not a thing in and of itself, just like dreams are not. These are phantasms, but human beings love to engage in conceptual reification, kind of like people being afraid of dragons and Bigfoot, and being scared to death by things that are generations inside their own mind, and the inferior nature of how their mind intellectualizes and conceptualizes things that don't ultimately exist. 99% of the things that you and I worry about in life are not of any importance at all. We worry about bills and countless other things. Bad things will happen to us if we don't pay the bills, obviously, but these things don't ultimately exist, and they ruin our lives. I'm as guilty of that sin, if you will, as you're guilty of it. But getting back to things that don't exist, things that exist conventionally, rather than ultimately. For example, time. Time is only a measure of magnitudes. Time is not a thing at all. We, of course, measure everything that we do by time, our age, the progression of age, the months, the years, the days, the hours, the seconds. We are always thinking about time, but time is not a thing in the cosmos aesthetos, and nor is it a thing in the cosmos nuitos. It doesn't exist at all. You can't warp time. You can't bend time. For empirical beings that partake of mass and magnitude and measure, time does exist. It exists conventionally, but we can't talk about it ultimately. There's no such thing as time. Time does not exist at all. Not ultimately, it does not. Neither does space. Space has attributes, but it has no properties. Space does not act upon anything. You can't bend space. There's nothing to bend. All presumed supposed and completely unreal spatial contracture, hypothesized by relativity and the idiots of quantum, is of course a field pressure or effect modality, i.e. an ether perturbation modality, It has nothing to do with bending space. Space has no properties to bend. It's like talking about bending unicorn farts. These things do not exist ultimately at all. Just like waves. There's nothing that scientists love to talk about more than waves. Waves of this, waves of that. Waves of what? There's no such thing as a wave. To talk about waves is like talking about flickering. You know, the flames that are flickering here on my monitor? I would talk about flickering, but why does nobody say waves of what? Flickering of what? Flickering is not a thing. Flickering is what something does. Yeah? The flames are flickering, right? Or moving, or pulsating. There's no such thing as a wave. A wave is not an essay. It has no principality. We reify and classify things subdeterminately based upon their conventional existence to us stupid human beings. Well, I'm speaking generally, but not specifically. I wish the scientists out there would actually consider this. They do these things and they wonder why they can't come up with a unified theory of the universe. Everything is already unified. It's that human beings love to subclassify and reduce and separate things. But they've never been separated to begin with, and they don't need to be subclassified. There's no such thing as dielectricity versus magnetism versus electricity versus so-called gravity. Gravity doesn't exist at all. Electricity is a hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism is just the dielectric field in expressing the loss of its energy or inertia that manifests as an expanding and contracting extrapolation of the interior geometry and ultimately that of the toroidal shape of force and motion, i.e. centrifugal divergence. That defines what magnetism is. But magnetism is not anything other than saying dielectricity and loss of its energy. If we were to say dielectricity and loss of its energy, we're talking about magnetism. Reintegration of that loss of energy or inertia, i.e. contracting, is increasing dielectricity, because smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. The larger the space, the less the capacitance, the less the potentiality. Magnetism is the actuality. Dielectricity is the potentiality. All the things that we think are different things are not different things at all. They're just different expressions of one and the same thing. Ice, water, and steam. Perfect little example. We all know ice, water, and steam are the same thing. Well, why do we need to subclassify them? Well, they help in our parlance of communication with others. You would never tell somebody to go grab some solid steam, i.e. ice, or go grab some condensed steam, or ice. Yeah, ice would. Someone would say condensed steam would be ice. I mean, these are the words of parlance for communication and conceptualization inside of our own minds when we communicate with other human beings. But from the perspective of Mother Nature, these things don't exist at all. The grand unified theory has always been there, and it's always been unified. It's that human beings love to classify and separate things. Hey, we got two different things here. This one's a white rock, and this one's a black rock. There's two different things. We're going to call this a igneous so-and-so. We're going to call this a sedimentary so-and-so. Human beings are really funny. I look at what so-called men of science say and do or believe and espouse and write articles about, and they're just confoundingly stupid. True understanding and wisdom is about ultimate comprehension of the essa of what something is, i.e. its essence. But human beings aren't like that. Most human beings are stupid. We want to rationalize things as things separate from other things. There's that, and this is this, and these two are different things. No, they're not. They're the same thing. There's no such thing as gravity. Electricity is just a hybrid, and magnetism is just a dielectric field. That means there's only one thing, and everything else is an ether perturbation modality. We have circular ether perturbation modality, we have longitudinal ether perturbation modality, and we have transverse ether perturbation modalities in the form of the coaxial circuit that we call light, which has a longitudinal component and a transverse component. And all of them follow the right-hand rule. And the right-hand rule really only means irreducibly and in simplex is is an energy expression is always the greatest throw relative to the source from which it came. But even that sounds complicated, but I mean, it's ultimately very simple. I understand, because everything in field theory follows the right-hand rule. But what does the right-hand rule actually mean? Because descriptions are not explanations. That's the other thing that I've talked about endlessly. Scientists love to describe things, but they can't explain anything. They'll it's like a doctor dissecting a human corpse. It'll tell you, this is the bowel, this is... Yeah, but you haven't really told me what it is. You know, you can define a human being by all its constituent components and how they're connected and how they operate, but you don't tell me what the hell a human being is. What's its raison d'etre? What's its reason for being? What does it do? What is it that makes it that? And you can't find that underneath the microscope or under the bright light of a forensic table. Human beings love to do that. They can describe everything to you, but they can't explain anything. That's exactly like the prior video that I made, like somebody that's read every book ever written on fishing, but they don't know how to fish, and they don't know anything about fishing because they've never fished. They don't know the essence of anything. Confusing the conventional with the ultimate is one of the countless fallacies and faults of modern science, which is not science at all. Science is the quest for truth. These people are not on the quest for truth. They're in quest for stature and praise and bigger paycheck, usually. Anyway, I digress too far. I hope you have a great week, and goodbye.